I becoming a multi-millionaire overnight would be the best night of my life, until a stranger whispered three words that froze my blood. Don't drink that. I was surrounded by celebration, champagne, and people smiling, but someone wanted me dead. And the scariest part, the person trying to kill me was closer than I ever imagined. Stay with me. I'm about to tell you exactly what happened, how I survived, and the lessons money never teaches you. The call came in at 6:47 p.m. I remember the time because I'd been staring at my phone all day, pretending I wasn't. When it finally buzzed, my heart didn't race the way I expected. It slowed down, like my body already knew this was it. "Congratulations," my lawyer said. "The deal is closed." That was it. No fireworks, no dramatic pause, just four words that quietly rewrote my entire life. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in silence. Years, that's what flashed through my mind. Years of 14-hour days, years of missed birthdays, cancelled vacations, and sleeping with my laptop open beside me. Years of being told, maybe next quarter. Almost there, just one more hurdle. Years of betting everything on an idea most people didn't believe in. And suddenly, it had worked. Overnight, on paper at least, I was a multimillionaire. I stood up slowly, walked to the window of my office, and looked out at the city I'd fought so hard to survive in. Nothing looked different. Cars still moved. People still hurried down the sidewalks. The world didn't stop to acknowledge what had just happened. But inside me, something cracked open. Relief hit first, heavy and warm, like finally putting down a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying every single day. Then pride, quiet, cautious pride. I hadn't inherited this. I hadn't lucked into it. I built it, brick by brick, mistake by mistake. And then disbelief. I checked my email. There it was, the confirmation. The numbers didn't even feel real. I reread them 3 times, half expecting them to rearrange themselves into something more familiar, something smaller. They didn't. I called the people closest to me. Short calls, controlled excitement. Everyone told me the same thing. You did it. You made it. Tonight you celebrate. So that's what we planned. Nothing wild. Nothing reckless. Just a dinner, a toast, a moment to breathe before life inevitably asked for more. By the time I changed and headed out, the tension that had lived in my shoulders for years was gone. For the first time in a long time, I felt untouchable, not arrogant, not careless, just safe. Safe because the struggle was over, safe because the grind had finally paid off. Safe because I'd crossed the invisible line everyone talks about, but so few ever reach. At the restaurant, everything felt exactly the way it should. Soft lighting, low conversation, the quiet confidence of a place that catered to people who had already made it. The staff smiled differently when they greeted you there, not impressed, assured. We sat, we ordered, glasses were poured. Someone raised a toast to the years it took to get here. Someone joked about how tired I must finally feel. I laughed, and it was real laughter. Not the forced kind you give investors or clients when you're pretending everything is fine. As the glass settled in my hand, I remember thinking something I'd never admitted out loud before. I'm done surviving? That's the dangerous part, I realize now. Not the money, not the attention, the moment you believe the fight is over, because when you stop bracing for impact, you don't see it coming. I leaned back in my chair, listening, nodding, letting the sound of celebration wash over me. For once, my mind wasn't racing ahead to the next problem, the next threat, the next deal. I was present, I was proud, I was calm, and I had no idea that somewhere between the kitchen and our table, something had already gone wrong. I didn't know that while I was thinking about new beginnings, someone else was thinking about endings. I didn't know that the glass in my hand represented more than a toast. I thought that night marked the beginning of my new life. I didn't know it almost ended it. The restaurant was exactly what you'd expect for a night like that. Low lighting, crisp white tablecloths, the kind of place where the clink of crystal glasses sounds deliberate, practiced. Success had an atmosphere, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. Champagne flowed easily. Someone ordered a second bottle before the first was even half gone. The waiter congratulated me when he set it down, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet nod, like he already knew this moment mattered. To new beginnings, someone said. Glasses lifted, smiles everywhere. I caught my reflection in the window behind the bar, relaxed, confident. A man who had finally crossed to the other side of fear. I raised my glass. That's when everything changed. As the rim of the glass hovered just inches from my lips, someone leaned in close to my shoulder. Too close. Close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. "Sir," a voice whispered, barely louder than the hum of the room. "Don't drink that." I froze. The glass stopped mid-air. My smile didn't drop. Not right away, but something in my chest tightened hard enough to steal my breath. "What?" I murmured, barely turning my head. It was the waiter, the same one who'd been serving us all night. Young, professional, calm on the surface. But his eyes weren't calm at all. They were wide, focused, urgent. "Please," he said quietly, his hand hovering just above the table, as if he didn't dare touch the glass. "Set it down." For half a second I thought it was a joke. Some strange attempt at humor, maybe a surprise, maybe part of the celebration. Then I saw his hands. They were shaking. Not the nervous shake of someone new on the job. Not excitement. Fear. Real, controlled fear. The kind people get when they know something terrible is about to happen and they're trying not to cause a scene. Around us, no one noticed. Laughter continued. Another toast started at the far end of the table. Someone clapped me on the back. I slowly lowered the glass. "Is there a problem?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. His jaw tightened. "I can't say it out loud," he whispered, "but I saw something, and I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't sure." My heart started pounding, not racing, pounding, heavy, deliberate thuds that echoed in my ears. "Sir," he said again, softer now, "someone put something in your drink." The world tilted. I looked at the glass, pale gold liquid, tiny bubbles rising like they had seconds ago. Nothing about it looked different. Nothing about it smelled wrong. I glanced around the table. Every face was familiar, friends, colleagues, people who'd supported me for years, people who had cheered when the deal closed. No one looked suspicious. That almost made it worse. "Are you sure?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." My first instinct was disbelief, denial, a reflexive rejection of the idea that danger could exist in a moment this perfect, this earned. But another instinct, older, quieter, kicked in. Survival. I set the glass down fully this time. "Bring me a fresh one," I said, loud enough for the table to hear, "and this one tastes off." A few laughs. Someone joked about expensive champagne being wasted. The moment passed. The waiter nodded once and disappeared, moving faster than he had all night. I didn't touch another drink. I watched. I watched hands, watched eyes, watched who leaned where when they thought no one was paying attention. I felt exposed in a way I never had before. Like the room had shifted and I was suddenly standing under a spotlight only I could see. A minute later, the waiter returned with a new glass. He placed it in front of me carefully. As he straightened, he leaned in one last time. "Don't say anything," he murmured. "Not yet." Then he walked away. I sat there, nodding along to conversations I wasn't hearing, my mind replaying his words again and again, Someone put something in your drink, and that sentence erased the celebration, erased the pride, erased the feeling of being untouchable, because someone, somewhere in that room or connected to it, wasn't raising a glass to my success. They were waiting for it to end me, and that's when I realized someone wasn't celebrating my success. The next morning, after the adrenaline of the near disaster had faded, I sat in my penthouse overlooking the city and replayed the last few weeks in my head. Every conversation, every meeting, every casual remark suddenly felt different, like the pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit until you looked at them from the right angle. It started with the phone calls. People I trusted, colleagues, advisors, even friends, were suddenly more helpful than usual. They asked questions I hadn't noticed before, details about my finances, about the structure of the deal, about who had access to accounts and contracts. I brushed it off at the time, calling it excitement, curiosity, or standard congratulations. Then there were the meetings. People who had never shown much interest in the numbers suddenly wanted detailed breakdowns. Some even volunteered unsolicited advice, insisting they were just trying to protect my interests. I remember smiling politely, nodding, feeling grateful for their support. But looking back, I see the tension hiding behind those smiles. Even casual friends acted differently. Invitations came suddenly, coffee dates, lunches, dinners, all timed perfectly before the final close. At the time, I thought they were celebrating with me, sharing the joy. Now I realize they were studying me, observing patterns, routines, weaknesses. The red flags weren't dramatic. Nothing was glaring. No one yelled, threatened, or demanded anything. It was subtle, almost invisible, but when I looked back, the signs were everywhere. Then there were the small behavioral shifts I had ignored because I wanted to believe everything was fine. My assistant seemed unusually nervous, always hovering around when I was alone, asking questions about what I wanted for dinner or where I would go after the deal closed. My financial advisor suddenly had urgent questions at odd hours. Even the valet, someone who had parked my car for years without complaint, seemed tense the day before the celebration. And then there was the conversation with my business partner, the one I'd known for more than a decade. I remember laughing that day when he casually said, "You're going to be the richest person I know by the end of the week. Just watch your back." I waved it off. A joke, right? Too casual to be a warning, too comfortable to be a threat. I remembered the champagne dinner 2 nights before the deal closed. My friends and colleagues toasted me, smiling and joking. But I noticed subtle things then too. Who touched my glass first? Who lingered near the table? Who watched me more than they watched the conversation? I didn't think anything of it at the time. Paranoia? Maybe. But now, with the memory of the waiter whispering, it all hit me like a freight train. Even my own emotions had betrayed me. I was so focused on the win, so consumed by the excitement of finally reaching the pinnacle of years of work, that I ignored the tiny signals. My brain was overloaded with relief and pride. I wanted to believe everyone around me shared that feeling. The patterns became clearer the more I thought about it. Subtle changes in tone, overly helpful behavior, questions that seemed innocuous until you lined them up side by side. Every small detail, every seemingly kind gesture now looked calculated. And worst of all, I realized how wealth had changed the room overnight. It wasn't me who changed. I was the same person I had been before the deal closed. But suddenly people treated me differently. Doors opened, smiles lingered longer, questions were sharper, curiosity felt like scrutiny. And those who had been indifferent now had stakes I hadn't even considered. Every conversation I replayed felt like a rehearsal. Every handshake, every congratulatory nod, every pat on the back. It had all been measured, not with kindness or celebration in mind, but with calculation. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. The realization wasn't about money, about fame, or about what I'd achieved. It was about awareness, about knowing that the perfect celebration, the perfect toast, the perfect night had been manipulated. That danger doesn't always announce itself, that it hides in plain sight, disguised as happiness, as friendship, as excitement. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, thinking about every interaction, every smile, every subtle gesture. Then it clicked, everything aligned. The near miss at the restaurant, the whisper of warning, the champagne glass I almost drank from, the subtle behaviors I had ignored. And then I understood. This wasn't random. It was planned. After the adrenaline of the near-death encounter faded, I realized something crucial. I couldn't just sit back and hope this wouldn't happen again. The first step was quiet investigation, not confrontation, not panic, observation, documentation. I needed to know who wanted me gone and why, and I needed proof. I started with the obvious. Every detail from the celebration night replayed in my head. The waiter's whisper, the champagne glass I hadn't touched, the nervous smiles and casual movements of people around me. Something in the way they moved, the way they looked at me, it all hinted at intention, but intention alone wasn't enough. I needed evidence. Messages were the first clue. Not from strangers, not from random texts, but from people I'd trusted. Hidden in casual notes, group chats, and even emails that seemed routine on the surface were suggestions, comments, and subtle nudges that now looked menacing in hindsight. Make sure he's at the restaurant at the right time. Don't let him switch his drink. Little things that at the time seemed insignificant now pointed to a plan. Financial motives were harder to spot. Money changes everything, and suddenly the people around me weren't just congratulating me, they were analyzing every asset, every contract, every potential leverage point. Someone close to me, someone I had trusted implicitly for years, had everything to gain from my absence. I remember staring at my accounts, the contracts, the lines of stock ownership, and realizing that in the wrong hands, my fortune could be redistributed, my influence erased. Then I looked closer at behavior in the weeks leading up to the deal. Conversations that had seemed friendly were laced with subtle pressure. Casual questions about the timing of the final close, what I'd be doing after signing, and who I would meet during the celebration. They all made sense now. They weren't curiosity, they were reconnaissance. It wasn't personal hatred, I realized. It wasn't revenge. There wasn't some deep-seated grudge. The motive was opportunity. Pure, calculated opportunity. My success made me a target. Someone close to me had been waiting for a chance like this. The deal, the celebration, even the champagne were all perfect timing to execute a plan that could have ended me before I even realized the threat existed. I traced it back to the people I'd trusted most. Colleagues who had praised me, friends who had toasted my success, even some family members. Each interaction, each question, each smile now had a new weight. Their intentions weren't visible before, but the signs were there. The patterns were subtle but undeniable. The betrayal hit differently than fear. Fear is immediate, visceral. Betrayal is slow, creeping. It lives in hindsight, in moments you never questioned, in smiles you thought were genuine. And when the truth settled in, I realized something worse than fear itself. This could have worked. I spent days documenting everything. Notes, screenshots, timelines, conversations. Each small piece connected to the next, creating a map of deception. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Someone had calculated every detail of my routine, my celebrations, my habits. They had orchestrated a near-perfect trap. Anger was present, yes. But there was something more profound, shock. The realization that someone I had relied on, someone I had counted on to celebrate with me, had instead plotted my demise. And what scared me most wasn't that they tried. It was how close they came, how easily it could have worked. I remembered the waiter's voice, the calm urgency in his whisper. Without that warning, without noticing the subtle cues I had ignored, I would have taken the glass, laughed along with the toasts, and the plan would have succeeded. I shuddered at the thought. And yet, amid the fear and betrayal, a clarity emerged. Knowing the enemy isn't about revenge, it's about survival. It's about understanding who they are, what motivates them, and ensuring they never have the chance to exploit you again. The plan wasn't random. The attempt wasn't passion or hatred, it was strategy, pure strategy. Someone had looked at my life, my wealth, my habits, and calculated, this is the perfect opportunity, and they almost succeeded. I leaned back in my chair and let the weight of it settle while the betrayal burned, but the understanding gave me power. Knowledge was the first step toward control, toward protecting myself. And the more I pieced together, the more I realized one terrifying truth. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was intentional, and that's when it hit me. What scared me most wasn't the attempt. It was how easily it could have worked. After the shock of discovering who wanted me gone settled in, I realized panic would accomplish nothing. Fear is a natural response, yes, but fear without action is fatal. I had narrowly escaped, and the first lesson of survival was clear. I needed control. And I needed it fast. I started with the obvious, my safety. Security wasn't just about bodyguards or cameras. It was about systems, routines, and anticipation. I quietly hired a security consultant, someone who could evaluate my home, my daily patterns, even my phone, and digital accounts. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious, just a network of protection that worked silently, always one step ahead. Next came legal protection. The lawyer I trusted was no stranger to high-stakes situations. I walked into his office with the evidence I had collected, messages, emails, notes, and timelines. Every suspicious interaction was documented meticulously. I explained everything, not as paranoia, but as fact. Each piece of information became a brick in a wall I was building, a wall meant to shield me and to trap the person who had almost succeeded in harming me. Financial security was next. Someone who wants you gone often wants something from you: access, wealth, control. I moved assets into protected accounts, reviewed contracts for vulnerabilities, and ensured that no one could manipulate my fortune as leverage. Each step was calculated, methodical, and deliberate. The fear of being taken advantage of fueled a precision I had never experienced before. But control isn't just about defense. Power is about strategy, and strategy requires patience. I didn't confront the person who tried to harm me immediately. I didn't call them out or announce my awareness. Instead, I let them operate under the illusion that they had succeeded, that I was oblivious, naive, or unprepared. Letting them believe they had the upper hand was crucial. In their arrogance, they would reveal more, make mistakes, and expose their methods. I also used technology to quietly monitor communications and behaviors. Nothing illegal, nothing intrusive, just awareness. Every text, every email, every subtle movement was recorded. The hunter had become the hunted. I wasn't driven by revenge. I was driven by control, preparation, and justice. At home, routines changed subtly. Entry points, schedules, and habits were modified without drawing attention. The people around me, even my closest associates, were informed discreetly, so no detail could be exploited. Fear had once made me vulnerable. Now it made me vigilant. Every precaution was a layer of armor, every document a shield. And yet the most powerful part of this transformation wasn't in security cameras or legal documents. It was in mindset. Fear no longer dominated me. It became a tool. It sharpened my focus, strengthened my instincts, and forced me to anticipate every possible angle. Where I had once been reactive, I was now proactive. Where I had once trusted blindly, I now verified constantly. The tables had turned. By the time I finished setting these systems in place, the world I had once thought I controlled through wealth alone had shifted. Money doesn't buy safety, and it certainly doesn't buy trust. But money, combined with awareness, planning, and precision, could buy control. And control in this case was survival. I documented everything carefully. Every piece of evidence that had been gathered became a thread in a larger tapestry. When the time came to act, it wouldn't be impulsive. It wouldn't be fueled by anger or fear. It would be deliberate, calculated, and undeniable. The person who had tried to harm me would soon realize that every move they made had been observed, recorded, and prepared for. And as I sat in my office reviewing the timeline, the messages, and the security reports, a grim satisfaction set in. They thought that money made me weak, that it made me vulnerable, that it made me predictable. They were wrong. Money hadn't weakened me. It had made me prepared. It had given me the resources to turn fear into power. It had given me the chance to ensure that when the moment came, the hunter would become the hunted, and that I would come out alive, unscathed, and in control. The plan was in motion, and I was ready. They had underestimated me. Big mistake. They thought money made me weak. It actually made me prepared. The aftermath didn't come with sirens or headlines. It came quietly. The guilty party didn't get dragged out in handcuffs that night. There was no dramatic confrontation in a crowded room. Justice, I learned, doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as consequences unfolding in silence. Legal pressure closed in. Doors that were once open to them began to shut. Opportunities disappeared. Conversations stopped. People who once felt bold suddenly became cautious, then careful, then distant. I didn't need revenge. I needed safety. And I got it. Security systems became part of my daily life, not because I was afraid, but because I was aware. I no longer mistook calm for control or success for protection. I learned that wealth doesn't shield you from danger. It signals you to it. I survived, but I didn't walk away the same person. Before that night, I believed success attracted happiness, that once you crossed a certain financial line, life smoothed out. Stress decreased, threats disappeared. People celebrated you because they were happy for you. That belief almost killed me. Money doesn't attract happiness, it attracts attention. And attention isn't neutral. Some people admire it, some resent it, some want proximity to it, and some see it as an opportunity, an opening to exploit, manipulate, or remove the obstacle standing between them and what they want. What shook me most wasn't the attempt itself. It was how ordinary it looked. A restaurant, a toast, a smile, a glass of champagne. Danger didn't look like danger. It looked like celebration. That's the lesson no one teaches you when you chase success. No one tells you that the higher you rise, the quieter the threats become. They don't announce themselves. They don't confront you head-on. They hide behind familiarity, behind trust, behind congratulations. I learned that trust should shrink with wealth, not expand. Before I trusted easily, I assumed good intentions. I believed proximity meant loyalty. After that night, I understood something deeper. Trust isn't about how long you've known someone. It's about how they behave when your position changes. Money changes how people see you, not always for the better. Some see you as a resource, some as leverage, some as a shortcut. And if you don't protect yourself legally, physically, and mentally, you become vulnerable in ways you never imagined. I put systems in place, not walls, but filters. Legal safeguards, security protocols, clear boundaries. Not because I stopped believing in people, but because I stopped believing success made me immune. I also stopped celebrating blindly. Celebration is emotional. Safety is strategic, and confusing the two is dangerous. Looking back, the most powerful thing that happened wasn't the deal closing. It was the moment I listened to a warning instead of my ego, the moment I paused instead of toasting, the moment I realized that survival isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I still enjoy success. I still appreciate what I've built, but I no longer let achievement lull me into complacency. Awareness is the real luxury. Preparation is the real power. Money gave me comfort. Survival gave me clarity. And clarity changed everything, because becoming a multimillionaire didn't make me powerful. Surviving the night someone tried to kill me did.